Riffing while black. I'm here with my good friend Dr. Lawrence James. I didn't have to look at your nameplate this time. I'm getting it. And, and this is Dr. Kazike Prince with you. We're Riffing while black. I just want to say, if you haven't already, encourage you to get online, like our posts, like our clips. And of course, if you want to get any questions, concerns, or thoughts in, we'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts. So please do if you can. With that
Absolutely.
said, uh, want to jump in on the fact that I was giving you crap last winter about how cold it was and how we were sitting in the sunshine, and
Right.
now I'm baking like a hot potato in 103-degree weather, and you over there all toasty, and you over there wearing a jacket. I'm over here
Right.
dying.
You over there sweating, and I'm like, it's cool in Chicago. I'm like, I think we might hit 75 today, man. I was like, it's pleasant,
Yes,
pleasant.
and this thing, like when you wear an undershirt here, it's so you can catch the sweat. When you wear an undershirt there, it's to have something
Insulation.
between your shirt, insulation.
That's right. I need some insulation in Chicago. You like, oof, I'm just sweating. Look, I
Anytime
get
I
it.
get
I
up,
get it.
anytime I have to get up and speak with folks, I would always put that undershirt on there
Right.
just so there's catch that just in
I said,
case.
right. You don't want that big
Like,
wet spot when you open up your arms. Folks be looking like,
like what?
why is he nervous? Why is he perspiring so much?
Well, I want to say
Because it's
I'm a big
hot
dude.
in Austin.
I'm a big dude and it's hot. Yes,
It's
so
hot.
I'm generating heat.
It's hot.
But
I
well, we
might be a
gotta.
tropical people, but it's hot.
I mean, tropical people know not to wear so much clothing. so,
Word, word.
well, we got a nice little list of topics to discuss today. I think many of them are relevant, but also have a certain staying power. The first one I'll cover is the side eye. This is based off of experience I had, based off making a post on social media, particularly Facebook. That's where all the middle-aged and 30-somethings hang out, and basically quoted by itself the quoted James Tallarico saying, "Keep Congressman Jasmine Crockett's name out your mouth." And he was talking specifically to his supporters and his friends and family. And so there was a whole uproar around that of sorts. Nothing seismic shift, but it was interesting for conversation. And then three topics we want to discuss. One is about presence as rebellion. We've kind of been talking and hinting around it the last couple of weeks, but I thought it was a good idea. And Lawrence, I know you did. It was you brought it up for us to kind of really kind of dig into that a little bit more. And then this whole idea of black erasure. It came up particularly around the erasure of black folks in Argentina, but then I wanted to have some conversation about that erasure here in the United States as the rebirth of Jim Crow and other ideas, and the racism that seems to be wrapping around the other kinds of bias. And so that idea of black erasure we wanted to cover a little bit. And then lastly, this is in relation to the young man found in Mississippi, dead. And
Nolan
this is
Wells.
not, I'm sorry.
Nolan Wells.
Yes, thank you. Nolan Wells, and he's unfortunately a part of a series of African American men, boys, women, and girls who have come up, who have been unalived, or the suspicions about that, basically not coming home safe. And so D.L. Hughley came out after maybe during an interview with Don Lemon saying, when we take our one white friend with us black and brown folks, they get home safe. And yeah, so we're digging into that and what that's about, and why it's funny to some folks and maybe not so funny to others. With that said, I do want to cover one of our engagement cards from the Djembe deck before we get into it. And so, if you don't mind going first, the first I noticed that there were more genders when blank. I first noticed that there were more genders when blank.
Well, my funny answer was going to be I noticed there were more genders when I was in Asia like 2 weeks ago as I was being hit up by ladyboys, but that wasn't the first time I noticed. To be honest, the first time well, I became really aware was for I was at the Association of Black Psychologists conference about a decade and a half ago. And I'm talking to you, and a shout out to my man and a man I consider a mentor, brother Ken Montero, was
Oh
doing a
yeah.
presentation on yeah, Ken's dope. Was doing a presentation on LGBTQIA folks, and he was the first person who ever really mentioned this idea of multiple genders. And he was like, he's like, there are like five genders, and I don't remember what all of them were, and it kind of blew my mind because I was like, you know, I got into, male, female, um, and an understanding of, kind of LGBTQ folks and transgender folks. And then I'm like, I had three. I'm like, five? I was like, oh Lord. I was like, I'm really out to know. So, and full disclosure, I don't really remember what the other two were,
Mhm.
but it opened up my mind, like this notion of the binary in particular, um,
Mhm.
isn't uh, maybe isn't as true as we want to make it out to be, and that there's a lot of fluidity. I think was kind of one of the things I took away um, within sort of gender. So, how about you?
I'll be honest. What you made me think about for myself is that I don't know if I believed it, like it was a possibility, but being exposed to it was, I think, what was important here. And I'm sorry, I'm over here noticing I'm still cooling down from my little exercise earlier.
Like black
But
man
yeah,
still on 103 degrees outside.
James Brown over here.
Looking a little shiny.
But and so I say that because I grew up a pretty homophobic. Idea of trans people didn't really even exist, to be honest,
Right.
growing up for me. And so my first exposure probably was in one or two places, in the church, because you had a number of people who are part of the church who were particularly men who are a little bit more effeminate in their presentation, maybe dressed a certain way. But
You being so nice. You being so nice. Because every choir director in the black church is a gay man. I'm like, come on now. We gonna keep it real while we riffing today. It's like,
right. Well, and the thing is, that, they may be the choir director, the drummer. They're usually a singing, right?
right.
And so there was that. But another person who got my curiosity when I was actually a bit younger was the singer Sylvester. Uh,
Mm,
and he was one of the
yeah.
a few out. Uh, I don't know what he identified, or I'm not even sure what his preferred pronouns are, but I believe it was he. He was a very effeminate, presented in a way that what some would say was called more feminine, but he was just really popular. He was real well known. He was on the circuit, and he had this song that I really liked. Even when I hear it today, I'm like, oh yeah, Sylvester.
You're like, that's a
Uh,
bop right there.
yeah, and I remember my mother's like, because you see him on the album cover. I forget
Hmm.
if it was a silhouette or not, and I thought it was a woman, and my mom was like, no,
Right.
that's a
He had like
man.
really long hair. Yep.
Yes,
Hmm.
and depending on when you saw him, he looked different. Like many artists. And I guess why I'm mentioning that because I think it was exposure to this world that just I wasn't familiar with, I wasn't a part of, and it was always a distant thing. It was over there, and it was very clear in my house growing up that was not considered okay. But I'll be honest, it was those were the things that exposed me to, and they weren't bad, they weren't negative, they were just they became bad when I was told they were bad. But
Right.
my exposure to people who are gay, who are trans, who are other genders, initially was kind of said to be a negative thing. But my personal experience was like, well, it doesn't seem so bad.
No.
They look like they're
No.
having fun.
Right. They're just living. Yeah. It is
Just living.
interesting though, because I mean, I think when you're young, it's just people, and you notice you're like, oh, he has really long hair. Or he's wearing. I
Hmm.
remember for me, it was like, oh, I think it might have been Sylvester, definitely Prince. Like,
Hmm.
oh, he's wearing makeup. Why is
Hmm.
a guy wearing makeup and being kind of confused by that? Which is not to say that had anything to do with his gender or either
Hmm.
of their gender expressions, but that was that first kind of like, hmm.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and I think at least for me personally, one of the things I took away was kind of nonconformity,
Hmm.
but not in a
Yeah.
bad way. You know what I
Right.
mean? It was like I
Right.
was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm
Hmm.
like, he's wearing eyeliner. I'm like, it was just more like, oh, that's interesting. Oh,
Hmm.
that's a different way of being a man, versus the kind of hyper masculinity.
Mhm.
that, I kind of grew up around, especially as a child of, Louisiana was, with my daddy and all my uncles who were like,
Mhm.
very, very hyper masculine presenting men. So yeah, that was, but beyond that, I mean, if you had asked me what the gender expression was, I've been like, what? I don't know
Well,
what you're talking about.
yeah, pansexual. I mean, the joke that
Right.
unfortunately I would hear all the time is they're trisexual, try anything. I'm like, now I'm offended hearing it.
Right.
And that was
It's
their way
very
of dealing with it, to make a joke of
hmm
it, make it
right.
something funny, but no, with no real understanding of what it was. So
hmm hmm
cool, appreciate that. Well, let's go. Let's get to these topics, bro. Let's leave.
hmm
Let's leave the Tallarico thing to the end for side eye. Part of me wants to go into the I don't know, DL Hughley situation because a lot of people are
Let's
paying
do it.
attention to it. A lot of folks, particularly I think yesterday it was announced that they did a not biopsy, they did what
The
was the word?
autopsy.
Autopsy.
The
Thank you.
autopsy.
Um, and basically came out with some uncertain kind of results that possibility this could have been some foul play involved. Maybe it was an accident, and but they're
Mhm.
not. It's not definitive, is the
Right.
point. And they're still waiting for information from law enforcement in Mississippi. And so this, if you were a person who had the mindset that this is the people making something out of nothing, he just probably did something and blah blah blah. Well, the evidence isn't showing that at this point.
Right.
Um, and um, and I think people generally are saying, "Hey, let's be transparent. Let's figure out what happened,"
Right.
because it just seems weird. But I think the context for folks who maybe are not aware of this is that you had this young black person who's considered to be pretty athletic and well known and liked, who went on vacation or with a group of white friends, and his family was aware of it. They approved of it. They assumingly had a good time while they were out there, but for some reason he didn't come back. He ended up being found dead, and people are very suspicious of the circumstances. Fast forward to DL Hughley, and he makes a comment like, "Well, hey, when black folks, black and brown folks, they have that one white friend because we all have that one white friend, and we go on vacation with them. They come home safe." And and some people kind of got offended by hearing that, but I know a lot of folks I've asked around, they're like they thought it was kind of not funny, but like kind of like I don't know, irony is the right word, but
Yeah. A
it
little
was like,
tongue in
oh
cheek.
snap. I mean, and because I
Hmm
was thinking, yeah, I mean, I don't know how many white friends I've had or women or others, and I'm always being aware of their safety. And I'm talking about safety like danger. I'm talking
Right.
about we're going to space. I'm taking them to a black space. I'm taking them to an event,
hmm
and I'm like, I'm not trying to take care of them. I'm like, hey,
Right. Do
you know,
your
this is
thing.
what it is.
Right.
But at the same time, being attentive, like I would do
Mhm.
with any other kind of guest in
Exactly.
my space, in my home.
hmm
And
Right.
and and so the idea that they wouldn't get home safely really
Safe.
bothers me. And
Hmm
it begs the question because now we have a series of situations like this. And there was even videos of the one black friend who's out tubing. I don't know if you saw it. And the friends were making animal sounds to him, making fun of him because he said, I don't know how to swim. And he had a vest on, but they were making fun of him
Okay.
that he wouldn't swim out to them. He's like, I don't know how to swim and I'm not taking a risk. And so
Right.
this white woman went out there with a little boat and picked him up and brought him in, but this whole idea that if you're a black person amongst an all white space, that your safety may always be in danger, regardless if these are people who profess to be your friends,
Right.
who profess to be looking
Right.
out for you. There's a danger that's still there, and you may
Mhm.
not get back home. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're white, no one even thinks about that you won't get home. I don't know.
Right.
I just again, I think it's a topic for good discussion, but interesting. And Dale Hughley came with that somewhat humorous statement.
Yeah, it's humorous and ironic, right? That he would say that, but I think you're onto something. Yeah, I mean, I think we will tend to take care in the Black community of those who maybe are different.
Mhm.
And it gets weird when we were just talking about, awareness of like gender differences, and I kind of jokingly talked about like, every choir director is a gay Black man. But I think there's a parallel because, in that instance, that church community takes care of that person who may be different. In that case, their gender or sexual identity um, doesn't ostracize them from the community, doesn't necessarily make them not cared for. Now, that may not happen in everywhere in their lives, but in that community, there's a safety that's there. Um, and I think that that's a part of African American culture. Um, we might say crazy stuff, but in the same breath, we're also caring for people who are in our midst who may be different in some form or fashion. And so I think, yeah, you know, when our white friends come and hang out with our black family and extended, we're looking out for 'em. We checking on 'em. Like, "You all right? You good?"
Good.
Right, just trying to make sure, like, "You good?" Right? Um, and I personally have had experiences with white friends, like, doing crazy stuff. I'll never forget, I was probably 17 years old, man, and me and a bunch of white friends and black friends, it was a very mixed group, of folks. We stopped it was like midnight, we stopped at McDonald's to get something to eat, right? Um, and we happened to be riding in the car of one of my white friends, and him and the other white friend, they just take off and leave us at McDonald's, me and my 2 other black friends. And this is pre-cell phone, so there's no phone call, blah, blah, blah. And I just remember thinking, I would have never done that to you, you know. And in their minds, it was just a joke. When they finally come back, now I ain't gonna lie. When they came back, passenger got punched in the grill.
You think that's funny, huh?
Right. You think that shit's funny. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna show you something funny. Um, and then they took off again and left us. And I was like, okay. And the crazy part is I gotta call my daddy at midnight to come and pick us up. And he was super cool. He didn't say nothing, but I know in his mind, my daddy was like, see, that's what you get for hanging out with them white boys. And I remember even then thinking, I'm like, that's some cultural stuff. I'm like, because what would make you, what in your mind would make you think that that's funny?
Well, because you're out and about, you're young, you're supposed to be looking out for each other, and
Supposed to be my
maybe
boys.
right. And thing is, under maybe different circumstances, it would be funny on some level, I guess. But and let's be clear, we have plenty of white folks who do look out for other folks. But I think what we're
True.
talking about is this feeling of, even when you're supposed to be your friends, people you've hung out with, who you've maybe even had dinner with and broken bread with, there's still this suspicion in sometimes some of our heads that our safety and our best interest is not at the heart of the situation. And what I think about is that movie, it was a Martin Scorsese movie, the Flower Mound, about the Native Americans, and I believe it was Oklahoma, who had all that land and oil, and those white men married, had children with these people, and basically conspired to murder them so they could have their land and their oil and make and take and here they are, supposed to be loving
Love it.
relationships,
Right.
and they're actually conspiring to take advantage of them and kill them,
Right. Right.
despite the surface appearance of what they're.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
there's that kind of weird weirdness. It's a distrust because
Distrust.
you hear. And the thing is, that's the minority experience, hopefully, but
Yes.
there's still this feeling like maybe that's something that I can't totally sit with. Like, it's kind of like what we hear about interracial dating. Like,
Mhm.
they'll be cool until they get mad at you and they call you nigga to your face.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so it's
Yeah.
like,
Look, I think you're onto something though, because I think there's an for people of color, and I'll specifically say for Black folks, I think there is a sense of not that you have to prove yourself, but of mistrust. Like, how authentic is your caring? How deep is your caring? Um, do your Are your actions congruent with what you say? And the irony for me, I was coaching a woman this morning, and I literally said to her, I said, at times, white, business culture is white culture. And what the culture expects or asks of any individual is very different in its expectations than is black culture norms. And that's not to say black culture norms are right and white culture norms are wrong. It's just they're different.
Right.
And maybe a part of that difference, KP, is an experience of mistrusting what you're seeing and experiencing when you are the person of color. The irony is on the flip side, that isn't so true, which I think has to do with white supremacy culture and the arrogance that comes with that. I mean, we talk about like seeing white folks come moving into black neighborhoods, and they roll in like they own the spot, right? And you're like, yo, you've been here for 35 seconds, and you act like
You running
like
stuff.
you trying to dictate, you running stuff, you dictating stuff, whereas black folks are like, you trying to, you doing this, running the temperature of the room. So, and then there's the conversation that, you may have even had with your son and daughter about, be careful, what does safety look like? And I think sometimes we go overboard with the talk.
The talks, the series of
The
talks.
talk. Yeah, the series of talks. But you also understand where, these historical vestiges where it comes from, and they're not so historical. Literally, this, Nolan Wells was murdered, or well, I shouldn't say he was murdered. He was unalived for some reason. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago,
Right,
and
right.
if it was isolated, you'd be like, okay, but it's like it's a series of incidents that you come across that seem to have a racialized element to it, and so there feels like there's something there.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, the last thing I'll say about this is I imagine that when you think about add on top of that gender dynamics, right?
Mm.
With the whole thing that we've talked about, that came up, I think last year, would women feel safer with a bear or a man? And I know we've talked about this before, but it's the same kind of distrust, right?
Mm.
And I don't know, I would assume that there are women who, even in a loving, caring relationship, there's still a certain like, can I trust this man? I feel safe, but do I feel totally safe? And I'm not saying they should or shouldn't. I'm saying the same dynamic may be playing out for women and their relationships with men, as we're talking about as being, black men in relationship with white folks. And so what I'm imagining is a black woman or a woman of color who doesn't know who to trust, whether it be these white folks, whether it be these men who show up consistently acting like men. And what do you do with that? And I guess for me, the only thing I feel like what I'm able to do is to be in conversation with these folks. So I'm not saying all white folks. I'm saying
Right.
with key people, working relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, have these honest conversations about, I don't feel. I'll give you an example. I was dating this woman. She's beautiful. She had a group of girlfriends she'd known for decades, and they wanted to go up to Wyoming, I believe. They wanted to hit some parks up in that. I'm like,
oh yeah.
Why I want to go up there?
Jackson Hole is dope though. I ain't gonna lie.
I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not pretty, beautiful. I'm
It
like,
is.
why I want to go
But
up
I get
there?
you.
Be the only. Why I want to be up there, but the only
Why
chocolate
does this
morsel.
black man, right? Why does this black man need to be up there in that spot?
and not just a black man up in the spot. It's a black man with a group of white people. Why I want to be in that environment?
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying they're gonna come after me. That's not like one of those movies where they come hunt me down. I'm just talking about my own
like
personal.
this ain't Get Out.
It better not be, because it'll be the same ending.
Like, I'm gonna Daniel Kaluuya your ass, sir.
But it's just, again, it's whether I go or not. All I'm talking about is the whole. I'm trying to figure out, are we gonna go on this vacation, and I'm gonna be in a space where I'm gonna be isolated, not just physically but culturally. And I don't know if that's. I'm not sure if I'm gonna feel relaxed. I might come back more stressed.
More stress. More stress. Yeah.
So I might still go to Wyoming, but I may not go under those circumstances. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And let me flip that because that's your experience as a black man and it's righteous. But I think you're also speaking to something around, in this case, white folks in white culture of be aware of what you are asking and at least ask a question around, hey, KP, here's what the circumstance is. How are you feeling about that? Is this comfortable for you? What might make it more comfortable? Because I think there's the lack of awareness of cultural differences plays into these conversations where many white folks, not all, but many, um, don't think twice because they're like, "Oh, your experience is my experience."
Right.
So therefore, and it's like with no recognition that, hey, my experience may not be your experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My assumptions or presumptions about this might need to be considered. And, I think, we may think about it around gender and relationships. We'd be like, hey, babe, you know, I'm a, you know, me and my ex used to go to Vegas all the time to watch sporting events. Now I met her in Vegas at a sporting event, so I assumed she liked it. So I felt on safe ground, but there were moments where I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go. I want to, I have season tickets to Chicago Bears. Do you want to go? Here's what it's like. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, it's very male. There's a lot of drinking, a lot of cussing. I mean, are you cool with that environment? And
Right.
she's like, I want to go to the game and see it. I'm like, all right, cool. But it was also like, hey, be aware.
Right.
Here's what goes down in this environment.
Because when we're in those spaces, we're our heads on the swivel, looking
On the swivel.
around, asking, "Is this a safe place? Where's the back doors? Who's in here? Am I the only one?" And these are the questions that we oftentimes ask. And so it doesn't mean we don't go. It
Right.
just means let's have the conversations about
Let's have the
context and
conversation.
experience
Yeah.
and what it's like. And that's whether it's gender, race.
Mhm.
I mean, we have even when you have conversations around like I grew up broke and poor, and I spent a time with a bunch of rich people talking about their vacation in Monaco. Do I want to deal with that today? Is that the conversation I want to be a part of?
Is that what I want to be a part of?
And I'm
And for
saying that
them, it's
someone
like,
who's
hey,
who's
that's your
gained
life. Right. But it's like, and you're like, okay, that's your life. And I need to make some choices around it. But it's also like, be cognizant,
yeah, right,
of who you're with. And I think that's that cultural piece of being able to kind of put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and even if nothing happened to Nolan Wells, maybe the ability of his white friends to have put themselves in his shoes to recognize, hey, what about this will be comfortable? What isn't? Et cetera. Or the example you gave, the young man in the tube not being able to swim rather than laughing at your friend, maybe you think about how do I support them
right,
um,
right,
in this situation.
right. Because their response to him is stop being a bitch.
Right.
And I'm like, come on, man. I mean,
Right.
I
Come
get
on.
it. I'm part of man culture. I know how we
Right.
are with each other. We give each other praise
Absolutely.
as a way of connecting.
Right.
And
And
we could do better.
whole lot. Whole lot.
Well, hey, let's switch on to another one because I think this is kind of related about this idea of rebellion, presence as rebellion. And I'll tell you what I thought of when you said that, because I think about me living in Texas. And I've had many a
Mm,
friend and family member tell me, you need to get the hell up out of there. You got a racist ass governor. You got stupid ass senators. They're changing laws. They're making it hostile for people of color, for women. The whole, body autonomy seems non-existent here. And if you're LGBTQ community, forget about it. And then I know too many
right.
people who've left. And I've told myself,
Mhm.
well, as long as I'm here, this is what I can do. This is part of my rebellion to stay, be present. And yes, it is a bit of feels like an assault sometimes. I was sitting in a room with a bunch of practitioners yesterday. It was just so good to be with them and be connected to them and not to think about them. And this is a racially, gender diverse group of folks, right?
Hmm.
It was just so good, and they're all in Texas for the most part. And it felt so good to be around them. But it reminded me of how much uh, being present is feels like a rebellion. So that's what I thought of when you brought it up.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And I think, in full context for folks, um, there was a video a young man shared on Facebook talking about an incident he had with a cop, and it's a long story, but if you can find the video, it's really profound. And at the very end, he talks about, as a black man, his presence in his community was a form of rebellion, and it really struck me. Um, like, yeah, wow, and especially like you, KP, working in environs like with senior executives in corporations, many of those executives are the only person who looks like them, male, female, black, white, straight, gay, etc. But even for me as a consultant in those environments, it is rare that I'm in a room that has more than one black person in it,
Mhm.
which is typically me. And so, you know, I think that piece is real. Like, your presence is rebellion. It is a form of rebellion, and it matters. But I'll extend it. I think it is not just enough to say my presence being there is rebellion. I think I would change what that brother said and say my authentic presence is the rebellion. I can just show up, but if I'm just showing up with a mask on, being, my best and or worst black white self,
Mhm.
then that's not really rebellion. That's just status quo.
Right, right.
But when you show up at full on as Kazike Prince in your full glory, and by the way, I have to say, love that shirt. Um, but when you show up in full flavor, that's the rebellion, because you're not masking, you're not being anybody other than yourself, and that presence to me is where the difference making happens, right? Because I'm showing up authentically as me. I show up as Lawrence, um, not some sanitized version of Lawrence to make you more comfortable. Um, I say some crazy stuff. That's just what I think and feel in the moment. And that's a challenge to the system and to the status quo. Um, that, some of it's really thoughtful, some of it's stupid, whatever. But it's just me being authentically me
Being human,
matters,
right?
being human. And then when I go home, I'm not stressed out because I just spent 8 hours trying to be somebody, being a version, not trying to be somebody, but being a version of myself, um, that is inauthentic and is a whole hell of a lot of work.
And I think that's the part, right? And I talk about this a lot. I write about it, I should say, is this idea of ease that many of us don't have the pleasure of experience. And I'm not even speaking. I'm not saying I am, but the ease of not having to worry about how you're gonna pay your bills, the ease about showing up in the space and not having to worry about how people may or may not receive you, the
Mhm.
ease of just being who you are, authentic, whatever it is, and just that ease that comes with it. I forget to remember the name of the movie. Oh, Sorry to Bother You.
Oh,
Remember that one? And David, not I forget the name of the brother. Danny Glover. He plays the old character of the telephone. Remember the telephone? And he was talking about how when you're white, you can't just sound white. You have to have a certain air in your voice, a certain ease, a lack of care, of any care in the world. And it's funny, but it's fucked up at the same time. Because that
mm,
ease, and I'm not talking about privilege. I'm
yeah.
talking about ease of living and being taking up your space and having no care in the world. That just it's uncommon, but unfortunately in this country it tends to be allocated to certain groups of people and not others, whether it's deserved or not. And I think for myself, I want people to have that sense of ease. But unfortunately, I think in this country, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, if you're LGBTQ, that even in that ease, that in that presence is a rebellion, because someone will see your ease and be mad about it. Why can't I have that? How'd you get that and I didn't get it? Why are you so special? You know what I'm saying? So even
Yeah.
so being in your ease, there's someone who's gonna be like, jealous or whatever you want to call it, and will try to take it away from you.
Absolutely. And that's where I think one has to be really centered in self, and self-aware. Because yeah, somebody gonna give you hate because you're tall. I mean, and it's like, okay, what you want me to do about that? So I think we can't. Like, go, I'm gonna
Okay,
go
I'll make
kneecap my,
myself
I'm gonna
shorter.
go kneecap, right? I'm gonna kneecap myself for you. But I think that comfort, one, awareness of who you are, comfort in who you are, that you show up, and again, it's recognizing ain't everybody gonna love you for all
Yeah,
kinds of reasons.
yeah, plenty.
And I'm not sure, at least the way I think about it, that's not even the goal.
Yeah,
Um, my goal is to show up as the best version of myself, and I would challenge everybody listening to us, show up as the best version of you. Because you're gonna go home, and the only person at the end of the day that you have to report back to is you.
yeah,
Um,
right.
and I'll draw a parallel. I think the more that you show up as you in all the environments that you are in, the longer you gonna live,
Telling me, telling me,
right?
because
Because
that's
the,
what.
the stress of trying to be something that you ain't, 8 9 hours a day every day. I personally believe it shortens people's lives
Well,
because
as they say
you're
in the
living
black
under
church,
stress all the time.
as they say in the black church, in the name of Jesus, no.
Like, no.
Back Satan.
Right, exactly. Back Satan.
Satan, in the name of Jesus, I rebuke you, Satan.
I rebuke you. We can go to church all of a sudden. He's like, how did we get from showing up authentically to go to church? But that's how we
This
do.
is authentic, right?
That's right.
I
I,
rebuke you,
I
Satan.
rebuke you, Satan, twice. Yeah, it's like, oh
Wait, but well, let's transition to this notion of black erasure. I think we hit on it a little bit when we were talking about Argentina and the active campaign by those in power who wanted to be associated with being more European, and literally killing and stealing and pushing out black folks out of that country. So I think they're 1 or 2% of the Argentinian population. But I think it made us think about the erasure that I think many of us are feeling, whether it's the 500,000 black women who lost their jobs once Trump became president last year.
my
You even look at the numbers of unemployment, where black folks are not, are higher unemployment levels. I'm not sure where they are right now, but I think last time I looked, they're around 7%, depending on where you are. And so why I mention that because of the erasure of our workspaces, people having to go start their own businesses and trying to survive on very little, if anything. But I don't know. What were your thoughts about erasure and kind of what's going on this Jim Crow 2.0?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I mean, and your point about, black women in particular in the federal government losing their jobs at an exponentially high rate. Um, but, and this also relates to decreasing DEI programming. Not that that was really the primary reason that black and brown folks were getting jobs anyway.
Right, right,
But all these things, I honestly, I thought about, like, even the whole case about birthright citizenship. Um, was another form of trying to erase legally, precedents that had been set forth to enshrine, kind of black folks being here. And so, in your home state of Texas, there's all these actions that are being undertaken, by Abbott and Paxton, that are essentially there to erase black and brown people. And so I think we're seeing a lot of legal things being done at the state level as well as at the federal level, that, one could argue aren't racist, um, in what they're trying to do, but the impact is definitely racialized.
right.
Um, and so we must be out here combating these actions, which are having, significant negative impacts on black and brown communities. And, I mean, living here in Chicago, we've been hearing all this stuff for the last 6 months because of ICE
Mhm.
around, like, literally stores and restaurants basically going out of business because, the Latino patrons aren't showing up
Mhm.
out of fear of ICE. I mean,
Mhm.
that, and I think that's purposeful, but that's a kind of erasure.
Mhm.
You and then I think about all these places and spaces, um, you know, in Chicago, what were formerly Black and brown neighborhoods, admittedly many of them poor, Latino neighborhoods. Gentrification is another way of erasure, right?
Mhm.
And so, how do we preserve senses of community in the midst of what feel like assaults
Mhm.
on our mere presence? And the last thing I'll say, if you go back to birthright, my family's been here for I don't know how long. Uh, you know, Generations and generations, great 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 grandparents.
Mhm.
But I can't. I have no way of proving that.
Right. Right. Other than being born
I
here.
mean, I was born here, yes.
Yeah.
Hell, I can't even find my damn birth certificate because the charity hospital in Lafayette, Louisiana, you know, they half-ass got some birth records and stuff. I'm like, come on, man, what y'all doing? So I mean, but it's stuff like that you're like, I don't think you could not say I'm an American citizen or a citizen of the United States, but just even having to think about it. And the converse, white folks are not feeling any pressure whatsoever that somebody's gonna come to them being like, you don't belong here. Because there's an assumption that they belong,
They must
you know?
belong. This, yeah, they must
Right.
belong. They don't. They're out. They're not living on the edge. They're not worrying about. I mean, unless you're a white immigrant from like Poland or whatever, then you might be thinking about it. But and there's been some instances of that, but rarely do we hear that in the news. And are we confronted with those realities? And is our community talking about it in these ways? So whether it's because of your immigration status, whether because of your race, we're having to be concerned about what creative ways they're going to come up with, or old fashioned ways they're going to use
Mhm.
to limit us, to dislocate us, to uproot us because of some claim they have that's
Mhm.
based off of some lie that they've created for themselves. And it's quite frustrating because, and I think the frustrating part is like, let's say this court case didn't go through. How many? I mean, they were saying they were only focusing on folks who were like coming here to have a baby and then leave, which I
Mhm.
don't think is true. Now they've opened up the floodgates for everything to be questioned.
Correct.
And so even though you've been here, my family on both sides have been here for at least 5, 6 generations that I'm aware of.
Right.
But uh, if that's not something we can rely on, everything's suspect. So, I think and unfortunately, I'm reading Brene Brown's book right now,
Mm.
Strong Ground, and one of the things that she talks about is a sense of when you're trying to create a change and transformation. You can have transformation like the Elon Musk of the world that's based off insecurity and creates kind of devastation across groups because you're doing it out of your sense of power and control, versus transformation that's not transactional but transformational,
Yeah.
where you're actually doing it out of concern and wanting to improve the organization. And so you're
Mhm.
going to break some things and you're going to deconstruct some things, but it's coming
Mhm.
from a place of how do we improve so it's better for the employees and the
Mhm.
shareholders and the community or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
And so I guess that's why I think about, if these folks with the birthright citizenship were worried about transformation that was going to make us more whole, it wouldn't look the way it looks. But it's
No.
done to disrupt people's lives and
Mhm.
make them feel like they're on the edge, and that's really their intent.
Yeah,
Forget whether they
absolutely.
pass. Yeah, that's their
Exactly.
intent.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite happy when scores of people are self-deporting and all these kinds of things, because you've created such an environment that they leave. I think it's also telling, in some of these questions, especially when it comes to ICE. Chicago has, I think, still the second largest uh, Polish community
Mhm.
in the world outside of Warsaw or whatever. At least
Mhm.
that's the lore that we tell. ICE ain't going to Little Poland.
That's what they call it, Little Poland.
Little Poland, yeah. or no, it's actually Little Warsaw.
Oh, Warsaw.
I
Okay.
I seen going over there, but I said sure enough going to Pilsen and Humboldt Park, which are largely Latino areas, um, and scaring the pants off of people in those environments. And so the selectivity of how you are approaching this, on top of the administration bringing in white South Africans on false pretense of being persecuted. I mean, there's a whole groundswell of behaviors that create fear and reinforce this notion that we were talking about of Jim Crowism. And it's not like, black and brown folks aren't sitting back. And I think our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters as well aren't sitting back going, that could easily be me,
Yes.
right? It's
Mm.
just a stone's throw away from that being directed at me. Um, and my family and black folks, only have to go back to, pre 1963, 64, 65, to sort of go, oh yeah, we actually, have lived through Jim Crow. We know what that's like.
Mhm. Well, unfortunately, some of us are forgetting uh, what Jim Crow is, and well, because this is the problem. Some of us have gotten some privileges, and so we think, well, if we just stay in our place, we'll be good,
Right?
and that's the
Stay in your
problem.
lane.
This is the problem.
Hmm.
Whether it's people that Trump has hired, it's kind of been a nice case study to see how corrupt power runs. So even though you might be on his side and you go with it, you say you speak the same words he speaks, eventually, if you dissatisfy him in the moment, he gets rid of you and you become the enemy. And now you're like, I knew something was wrong from the very beginning. Then why didn't you say something?
Right.
Say something, see something, say
Right.
something.
Right.
But when it benefited you financially or otherwise, you didn't have anything to say, and
Right.
it's
I mean, that's the
frustrating.
problem.
But welcome. It's good that
Right.
I feel like Mr. Rourke. Welcome to Fantasy Island.
Fantasy Island.
Now that you're here, well, hey, we got
Now
one
that you're
more.
here.
I'm sorry, we got one more topic, and then we're gonna get out of here. This whole Talarico situation. I keep on wanting to be like done with this, like the hit that like was. I want to find. I know for my animal friends, they're gonna be pissed off at this, but you know how they beat the dead horse. I thought the horse was dead, buried, with a nice little sign that says, it was nice. Thanks
Ear
for coming
lay.
for the ride.
Right.
We're done. We're
Hmm.
moving on to focus
Right.
on the competition against Ken Paxton and focusing on
Right.
that. No, we're still talking about it, and I'll tell you why. Is James Talarico, and I personally think it's a good thing. He came out and he says, "Look, I'm paraphrasing, but he said to my friends and family and my supporters, he's basically, I love you,
Mm.
but keep Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's name out of your mouth." And I thought his choice of words were a little poetic and ironic at the same time, because this is the same thing that Colin Allred, who was a previous elected official,
Hmm.
who said about him, because he had said
Hmm.
some. It was believed that James Talarico had said some negative things about Colin Allred. So his choice of words with this largely black community event in Houston, one of the largest black populations across the country
Right.
in Houston, he
Hmm.
uses those words to his own constituents. I thought it
Mm.
was comical. It was ironic. And so I took his words, his quote, and put it on my Facebook and said, it kind of almost like, see, that's what I'm talking about. And you have people who are critiquing me for not putting the full context of his statement on my Facebook
Mm.
page, or not adding more words. All they put was what he
Okay.
said. It was a direct quote.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
people who I've known who are like, "Oh, if I were you, I would have done this and I would have done that." I'm like, if you want to do that, put it on your page.
Right. You
No,
got Facebook.
no, I trust people are smart enough, brilliant enough, and blessed by God's love and grace, that they can go on the internet and find out what they need to find out about when did he say it, how he said it, blah blah blah.
That's by God's love and grace.
Yes, but they're spending time critiquing me for not doing that, and that somehow
Right.
I misquoted him, or I'm misrepresenting his interest, or I'm
Right.
doing something nefarious. And I'm
Right.
like, but this is exactly what James Talarico is talking about.
That's what
We
he's
on
talking
we
about.
on the same team, and you swinging the bat at me like
Right.
I'm the problem. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of talking about what actually is important, which
Important.
is what he's talking about, us coming after each other when we should be coming after
Mm-hmm.
someone else in
Right.
this election.
Yeah. I love that piece of your statement because I thought, man, that was a part of why I wanted to talk about this because I was like, yeah, I mean, let's keep eyes on the prize. I mean, what we're sitting over here beating each other up, spinning wheels, talking about from my mind stuff that doesn't matter. I'm like, Talarico won. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And if you're a Talarico supporter, literally, why do you have Jasmine Crockett's name in your mouth? I mean,
He should be doing more. She's doing plenty.
she's doing a lot,
She's doing,
you
some would
know.
say doing too much.
Well,
She's working her
I heard
ass
I've
off.
heard that too. Right.
Right.
So it's like and by the way, even if she did too much, if you, James Talrico, and the people who are supporting you aren't doing your share to get out into black and brown communities, that's not on her.
No, never
That's
was.
on you.
Yeah.
That's on you.
Yeah.
You know,
And, and,
do your don't ask her to carry all your water for you. You got to carry
that's
some of your own water.
And I think that's what was beautiful about his statement. I mean, in full context, he acknowledges all that. He said, "That's my job. That's what I
Good
need
on
to do.
him.
I need to build relationships. I need to go out there in the community. I need to build the cultural credibility, the whatever the nuance to be there." Matter of fact, part of the same incident was a woman said basically because I think she's some kind of influencer. I don't know how much, but
Mhm.
she wanted to meet with Talarico, I think personally, and she was having trouble getting a meeting with him. So she called him and his staff out in front of everybody, which is
Okay.
kind of how we do sometimes. We get,
Right.
a little extra,
Mhm. Right, a little
and,
extra.
and right. And his response was like, okay, I hear you, and we're gonna make this happen. And she was, pretty upset and everything. But people kind of like, well, this, and I'm like, this is how it is. This is what we do. And I guess what I'm feeling good about is I feel like so far I don't think Tellerico's done all the things he'll need to do to garner
Mhm.
the votes and the
Yeah.
enthusiasm that people that he and probably others want him to have. But I think he's moving in the right direction, doing
Mhm.
things like this, having these kinds of events. So
Mhm.
they're paying attention on this woman who's screaming at him. People are focusing on him making statements that seem a little theatric. But to me, the point is that he's I think taking the right steps to get the kind of relationships he wants for this election to go in the way that he wants to go. And I guess that's the part I want people to talk more about. Number one, and number two, uh, speak to what he was talking about, which is why are we coming after each other? We should be on the same team.
Same
And
team.
and if you don't want to talk about, let's how about we just get on the same team
Mhm. Right.
then.
Right. Right. Because me and Jasmine on the same team.
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't know if they're really talking. The election was rough. Matter of fact, I don't
It's
know if her.
politics.
Yeah, it's politics, right? And I mean, let's go back to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Mhm.
I don't know if they disliked each other, but when they were running against each other, it got ugly. She had some of her people saying, "Shame on you, Barack Obama." I forget what it was about, but I was just got. I think it could have been nastier. Don't get me wrong, but it got nasty enough.
It was nasty enough. Yeah.
And the fact
Mhm.
that they were able to figure it out, and she became the
Mhm.
Secretary of State, and to me, in my opinion, was pretty good at what she did.
Yes.
You don't have to agree with me, but it's
No, I agree.
but there was clearly a dis. There was they didn't get along because
Right.
of the
Right.
election.
You got something I want and I got something, vice versa, right? And it's like, you know, let's hug it out at the end though. I
Right,
mean, our,
right,
our
and
goal is to win the election.
yes, and that's what they did. I mean, because and some people were pissed off with Hillary because they felt like she felt entitled to have the position.
Hmm.
And here comes this young upstart out of Chicago, who just comes across a little bit more likable. And maybe there is sexism involved. I'm not saying there isn't, but
Absolutely.
but he did come off a little more likable, and he had less baggage because he wasn't around as long as she
That's right.
was. And
Hmm.
so I imagine she was probably pretty pissed off about it.
Pissed.
But then she found out who she could really be pissed off with and about, and that's called Donald Trump. Because when she did
Mhm.
win, she got beat by this fool. Now that's
Right.
something to be mad about.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you asking me about it. I was, I don't know. I'm not mad about it. I'm just more like, here we go.
But you're raising an important issue, which is like, let's be focused on what is really important. I was watching the movie Rustin
Oh
by
yeah,
Rustin
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. Beautiful.
civil rights, the March on Washington, and there was a bunch of mud being slung at him because of his sexual preference. Um, but it was watching the movie, it was just really interesting where the whole conversation became, we're focusing on Rustin, and beating him up about what he is or isn't, and his baggage. But they're like, the real the real journey, the real fight here is getting the Kennedy administration to pass civil rights laws, right? And this man is best positioned to help us to pull this event off, right? So let's focus on that, um, and let us coalesce around this event to help move that needle. And so I think in many instances, whether it's within the Black community or when you're cutting across lines, that question about what's our goal? What are we really trying to accomplish? Always has to be at the forefront. And then it's the conversation around how are we aligning to achieve this goal? If our goal is to beat Ken Paxton, then how are we aligning around that
Yeah,
to
I
make
feel
that
you.
happen?
That's a really great example because that was a big thing at that time. Rustin was clearly one of the most talented organizers in the country in a lot of
Yep.
different ways, and I'm
Mhm.
not sure if anyone else would have been able to pull that off as much as. But the threats, and this was from the Black and white community because their
Yes.
frustration, they wanted to use
Mhm.
that for whatever reason. But again, it was coming from a place of power and control, right? Because he clearly was doing his job,
Right.
but and it was sad to see the consequences of that afterwards. But hey, bro, it's been cool talking with you. You got me all riled up about this old James Talrico, Jasmine Crockett nonsense. But you know what?
I'll be waiting for your next post.
But for those out there, I rebuke you. I rebuke you, Satan.
I rebuke you, Satan.
Feel like what was it?
Right.
Whoopi Goldberg in the color
Oh,
purple.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
Whatever
yeah,
you do
yeah.
to me, you do
Me,
to
right.
yourself.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
All right, brother. Well, this is Riffing While Black. It's been a
Always good
pleasure,
to
my
see you, my
brother.
buddy.
And I'll see you
Always.
next week. All right.
Sounds like a plan. Have a great rest of your week.